governance problems. I've been working in this space for a while, and I'm really, really honored to be here today to moderate this discussion and support and celebrate all of the great work of Humane Intelligence and my friend Ramon and her entire team who have done such a great job building up this organization. Today, we're here to talk about cross-sector collaboration for AI safety and governance. And I'm really honored to be joined here by a very distinguished group of cross-sector leaders to share in this discussion with me. And we were all getting introduced, behind that panel a little bit earlier and agreeing that we all have very complicated last names that we're struggling to pronounce for one another, particularly on limited sleep and traveling all over the world. So we're going to be referring to one another on a first name basis for the purpose of this discussion. But as each of you kick off your opening statements or remarks as we get this discussion going, please do say your full name so that everyone can hear you pronounce it in full. And I think you all will be glad that we do this. So anyways, let's get it started. We're here in Paris. We're talking about cross-sector collaboration. The Action Summit is really all about bringing together stakeholders from every sector of the economy, of society. And it's a different tone, right, than some of the previous summits that we've had on AI governance, AI safety. And I think it's important as we're here talking about governance and all of this stuff that, getting aligned on definitions, aligning perspectives on definitions is very important. And so I'd love to hear from each of you. The AI Safety Summit, we have the AI Summit in Seoul, here's the AI Action Summit. Where are we going next, and how can we promote and really foster more alignment around shared definitions for what we're talking about when we're talking about AI governance? What can we do to help sort of bring these perspectives together and work across sectors to align those viewpoints, those perspectives to really make progress here? I don't know if anyone wants to start. Paulina, great, thanks.
Hello, my name is Polina Zvagina, so that's the hard name number one. I lead a lot of our AI policy efforts at Meta. You might know our model called Llama 3, and it is our open source model, and we also make a lot of other technologies available through open source or through other open licenses. Um, Okay, so when we start to talk about AI safety, I think over the last year, AI safety has replaced some of the language on responsible AI, and it got a little convoluted, and it got complicated, and therefore, it's just like this big umbrella term. So I think the future of AI safety is that we really are going to try to understand what we really mean. So, our, of course, public position on frontier safety and how we treat frontier risks are addressed in a framework that we published on Monday, our Frontier AI framework. And that really talks about just like the biggest critical harm spaces and things that national security is very focused on right now. But of course, we know that AI safety goes significantly beyond that. So the things that I'm really focused on this year and that our company is focused on this year is on AI adoption. And as Ruman said, now these models are so commonplace and going to be adopted by many, many businesses. It has the opportunity to grow GDP in the next 10 years by 10%, some say. And so I think it's really important for us to start thinking about AI safety as it relates to individual use cases. So AI for medical practitioners is going to look different than AI safety for finance. AI safety for government is going to look different than AI safety for technologists. And each one of us will have to define what it means at the end state of what we mean and what we want our models to be able to do and what we don't want them to do. So I think as we are thinking about AI safety going forward, we're going to be really focused on examples and case studies and making sure that, as Ramon just showed in the programs that her team is running, that every team who is going to be using models to advance their specific purposes can have tools to make sure that they can test for the types of issues that are most concerning to them. And I think the other part is that, especially from an open source perspective, it's really important that the models are adopted on a global scale so that also AI safety is defined individually by different languages, different countries, different governments, and that it's not always happening in one group. And so as the models get adopted by a particular language, then they can define what safety means for them, which is why the global consortium of AI safety institutes is so important right now.
Hello, my name is Ditte Bjerregaard. I'm the acting Danish tech ambassador. And we founded the tech diplomacy as part of our broader foreign policy in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs 8 years ago. So it's amazing for us to be here today and see that the thoughts we had then of the need of thinking diplomacy in new ways and course cutting with industry, academia, and civil society to be here. And maybe also please let me start with thanking Humane Intelligence for being here in Paris and very much in the spirit of the summit, delivering action to the global dialogue and delivering capacity. But maybe before the rest of the panel gets more specific into safety, I would like to start with maybe a more foreign policy or diplomatic approach to it, because AI, being this very transformative and foundational technology, has really moved into the center of geopolitics. And there's this question: is the risk of the technology in itself seen as more dangerous than the risk of the competitor in this race? And what's been really interesting is that we see both developments, and we have actually managed to have governance of the AI developing despite of what we experience geopolitically. From the Bleachley Declaration to Seoul, to the UN. Now we have the Global Digital Compact, and where we have seen this move also from being very much founded in managing the risks clearly enough. This is our job as diplomats, as governments, that we have to address these, but also more and more moving into direction of the potential. And I think this is very much the task in front of us here in Paris, also to move ahead on the actionable side. And this needs governance structures, of course, standards, what is safety, different types of safety. It needs oversight mechanisms, of course, but they are actually developing. The question is, of course, this technology is moving so fast. The actors are different. This is very much driven by the tech companies, that we need to use the structures we have, but we also need to think in new ways of collaborating. This is what we are born out of in the tech diplomacy, and also understanding that this is moving so fast that structures alone and standards would not do it. We need to not only have a common understanding, but also have more common knowledge and capacity globally. And that's what I really admire Humane Intelligence also bringing this to the table, to the global table. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. Serafina and Nico, I don't want to cut you off, but I want to maybe pivot a little bit, unless you have something specifically to add about this. And I'll put this to you, Nico, talking about global governance structures, right? One of the big questions that I think a lot of people have, and one of the hot topics of conversation throughout this week and generally has been, what existing mechanisms, structures do we have that can actually solve some of the challenges that are posed by AI, these global challenges? Are they fit for purpose? How do they need to change? And what role does this new network of AI safety institutes or these global summits really play in achieving that goal?
Well, good Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Paris. Bienvenue. I'm one of the Frenchmen in the room, and welcome to Paris. It's great to have you here. It's great to bring very many different perspectives around that complicated questions. I'm the CEO of Prism Eval, a firm that I founded in 2014, an AI policy think tank. Oh. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Wow. Good morning, everyone. Bienvenue. C'est Paris ici. So I'm one of the few French people in the room, very happy to have so many very different perspectives to address that very complicated topic. Very happy to host the summit here in Paris after Bletchley Park and Seoul, and looking forward to seeing where it will go next. For those who don't know me, my full name is Nicolas Miaille, one of the complicated last names, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Prism Eval, a Paris-based eval organization, and we specialize and we have developed a behavior elicitation technology, and we're starting to measure. So we are in the business of metrology innovation, and we're trying to develop new metric to understand in the context of deployment how these complex artifacts that large models are stochastic in nature, how they behave. And so we are developing this behavioral technology, and we are releasing a first leaderboard to compare how most of the state-of-the-art models behave when confronting what we call malicious instruction, which is something that our kids, that criminals could be tempted to do. Some people suffer from addiction, for example, and how they are going to relate to these artifacts to elicit things that may not be so good for them. It's another problem that is running parallel to another huge one that we are discussing this morning, which is bias mitigation. They overlap, but they're different. And that's one I think we're starting to address. Before that, I was very involved in governance of AI. I founded the Future Society back in 2014, and I've been one of the proponents of institutional innovation for global governance. To address your question head on, I want you to leave the room this morning, after all these sessions, from my side, with two concepts. One in institutional innovation, and the other one is metrological innovation. You see ties things I've been doing for the past 10 years. I've been proposing since 2017 that we build a global governance of AI regime complex as a complex interweaving of norms with the first cornerstone, which should be an IPCC for AI. I started writing about that in 2017 or 2018 because I believe that the polarization around the epistemics, around the dynamics of AI is so brutal that we need to be able to rally around common understanding, common definition. Is AGI around the corner, or is it for never? What the heck do we mean by AGI, by the way? So these things being science-centric, science-driven, based of matter of fact to drive evidence-based policy making, a lot of hot words, but they're important, is going to be crucial. And I'm very happy that at Bletchley Park, we started to kick off that process, entrusting Joshua Benjo with a report that is inspired with this method of IPCC-ish for AI. I hope this will continue. This is very important. This is just one building block. Metrology innovation. As I said, we are facing innovation dynamics where we're putting at the center of our tables stochastic systems that are not easy to interpret and almost impossible to interpret. And we are growing them and deploying them over more and more agentic pipelines, lacking fundamental understanding of how they operate and lacking the way to explain them. And so much like when we have confronted in the past, the fact of dealing with big black boxes at the center of our social contracts, such as the human brain or human body that we do not understand, and inventing processes of clinical trials to try and reconcile the need for innovation to cure cancer with the need to respect human body and mind. And so I really think that these new forms of metrology and trying to define new metrics to understand these artifacts without anthropomorphizing them. We understand that those who develop these models need to instruct them in a way that they are finally appearing to us as conversational agents, creating this spiral of potential misunderstanding in terms of what they really are. There are different artifacts, different models, and we should really, including how we build those metrology approaches, refrain from anthropomorphization. And finally, at this intersection between institutional innovation and metrological innovation, we need to be able to cooperate more. The network of AI Safety Institute that is emerging is a wonderful tool to do just that. What I at times worry a little bit about is the temptation to over-institutionalize a process, meaning we have a network. Do we need an international organization of AI Safety Institute? Maybe or maybe not. I mean, you feel the wind from the US right now? You think that such an institution would be backed? If we lower down the threshold of what we're expecting from international cooperation to something which is extremely functional and focuses on things which might look a bit boring, but which are damn important, we might achieve better results than asking for a constitution for the world or an international safety organization, because we have no agreement and understanding of what we mean by AI safety, by AI ethics, by AI development, and we have to address the needs of the global majority.
Mhm. Got it. Yeah, being from the US, I can fully appreciate those comments. So metrological innovation, institutional innovation, but no global constitution, not too much institutional innovation in a way that gets over the top. Serafina, you are a leader in AI safety, lead AI safety at Cohere. How do you think about all of this, these global organizations, how they're organized, how they relate to one another? Share with us your thoughts.
Yeah, so I have another of the complicated last names. I'm Serafina Goldfarb-Tarrant. I lead the engineering and science team for safety at Cohere, where we build, so I basically just build foundation models with safety in mind. Yeah, so it was interesting hearing you talk about metrological innovation, because at least as far as like a huge amount of what these global institutions are doing is some type of evaluation of some type, right? And I think it's tricky, right? Because to some extent we need metrological innovation, but to some extent we just need metrological rigor, like that has of like a huge amount of these things are not innovation. They're not like sexy growth words. It's like we have known lots of ways to do evaluation that we're not currently using. Like there's, you know, huge amounts of fields, usually from social sciences, which I am not in, but I try to take as much as possible from like conceptualization and operationalization of harms and from like validity of your metrics. And I see almost none of that actually in any of the current evaluations around. It's like most people can't tell me what actual harm they're conceptualizing if it's someone external to my company. You know, like as in if I'm evaluating something, I'm trying to make sure that my model is not going to screw over like large minority groups when someone deploys it in an HR application, something like that, or is not going to be able to accidentally create a bunch of insecure code when someone's using it as a, like those are super different types of harms, but all matter, or that someone can't use it to generate malware, which is more the sort of thing that you're talking about, yeah? And so like I have a conceptualized harm that I'm trying to predict. And I feel like we'll need a bunch of innovation because a bunch of things like agentic systems are going to be very complicated to evaluate. But I think we also need like some amount of looking backwards and being like, people have done this before and they have thought about it, and we should ground it in it and not like I make jokes a lot that like machine learning every year like reinvents an existing field. Yeah, so which I feel like as yeah, I can make that joke because it's from the community I am in, but shade on us for sure. Yeah, so I think we definitely need a lot of that. Yeah, and as far as the sort of like global AI safety institutes, I feel like people are one of my big things from noticing interacting with the various ones in different countries is that I feel like they're not playing to their strengths as much as they can. So like a lot of my interactions with AI safety institutes, they're sort of trying to do what my team does already. Like I have a team of engineers and scientists who I have hired specifically for their ability to train models well, for their ability to evaluate models well, for their ability to synthetically generate data, all of those sorts of things. And those sorts of things can be helpful for someone else. But what I don't have is I don't have people who are really experts in like behavioral testing often, or people who are experts in the way people spread misinformation, or people who are experts in, you know, like exactly, you know, how different like people spread viruses and stuff like that. Like all of the sort of verticals of someone misusing a model or something along those lines, or even just like widespread subtle societal harm. I don't have experts because those are sort of like those are much bigger fields, right? They're huge fields of people who focus in those things, and I can't hire them all because I'm like, you know, my team is like 6 people. So, and I feel like to some extent, but these institutes have like connections. Like one of the big things they have is connections to lots of different types of people and NGOs and government and lots of stuff like that. So they have the ability to tap into that sort of thing more than I do. And so I feel like there's like my big thing about what there is compared to, I don't know, when I first started getting into like responsible AI type stuff like 8 years ago or so, compared to back then, there's like a consensus that like something should be done. And I'm pro that. Like, that's great that you're no longer walking into a room and being like, guys, you should care about this, and people are like, what are you talking about? So we've progressed beyond that, which is really nice, even though none of us agree what it is, and I think we won't, and that's fine. But as long as you're in the room talking about it. So all of the AI safety institutes do and governance structures do have that, and I think that's really helpful because it also does create market pressure. Like, it means that like our clients are more aware of it than they would have been previously, and that matters to me, right? It gives me more, like, I am in this because I want to make safer models, but it matters if someone externally is asking for it. That's great. Like, that's really helpful. But I think there's a really big missed opportunity in that people are going for the like, oh, we're going to do like the sexy machine learning thing, and it's like we kind of have that covered. Could you give us like domain knowledge of the way that information disperses and knowledge of the way that these, or even just collaborate with us on working that out, since I know some of it's new because LLMs still haven't been around for that long.
All that. Thank you so much. I'm going to point out something that you said and then just sort of asked everybody to share their thoughts about it. This is really at the crux of like why we're here, right? It was a big theme of what Rumon mentioned at the beginning of the event. How do we bring in these different perspectives, areas of expertise, domains, to improve these systems that we are all using and that are being proliferated around the world? How are you, Nico, and Polina, maybe specifically, sort of like, where has this worked really well? I mean, you're saying, Serafina, like, what's old is we need to leverage the expertise that we have in fields that aren't just, fancy, sexy machine learning. How does Meta think about that? How do you integrate the perspectives of behavioral scientists, of anthropologists, of ethnographers, all of these folks whose perspective is really, really valuable and important, particularly as we're thinking about building AI that works for everyone?
Such a good question. So I'm going to talk about two things that we do, but there's of course more. One is external feedback. So we have multiple mechanisms by which we work with organizations to collect information from all of the different fields. And I'm just going to highlight a couple that I work very closely with and that I love. So the Partnership on AI has been doing AI for a long time, and it is one of the organizations. It's an umbrella organization that defies any kind of definition, because they have industry and academia and civil society embedded within, and focus on topics that are crucial to the AI space at any given moment. And then it is highly research based. And so what I really love about Partnership on AI and the work that we've done, for example, on synthetic media, is how deeply integrated all of the different groups were in developing the synthetic media framework and then testing it. And if you go on the PAI synthetic media website right now, you'll see that we have published dozens of case studies from the different organizations who took that framework, applied it, and are able to test it and say, well, this is how the framework was helpful. These are the things we didn't anticipate that the framework would bring up for us. These are the ways in which we had to change how we applied the framework. And then, of course, now that the 2-year anniversary of the framework is coming about, PAI is going to publish their overall findings on what the case studies brought about and do changes to the framework as they see fit. So one of the ways in which, and that's just one organization, a more recent organization that we've been a part of is the FMF. And FMF is also another organization that are mostly industry that is all building frontier models. And that is a place where we're looking at very large systemic harms and trying, as Serafina said, predict what are the things that people are going to be most concerned with and that the governments are more concerned with, and in general apply to all large models. And then how can we apply the learnings from FMF and figure out approaches that address those harms from an ecosystem perspective, from a model perspective, from a product perspective, and from a framework perspective, like what can be done. And so organizations like that have been really helpful in bringing in those perspectives. We at Meta also do a lot of different styles of roundtables. So we have our privacy roundtable work that we do. We have AI expert roundtable where we pull in expertise from people in the industry and not in the industry across the field so that we can do and create systematic approaches to what Serafina is describing. And then lastly, the overall kind of governance work that we do that's more global, where we have a lot of programs where we're trying to understand what are the consumers most concerned with the technology, and then how are we going to actually apply the things that people are concerned with to our AI assistants and things like that that we're deploying in the wild that are not just our open source models. And then secondly, Chloe, to your point about what are existing ways that we can look to governance, I think open source very much is an answer, because you release a model and then you have many different people deploying the model, testing the model, writing about the model, finding issues with the model. And that creates a really virtuous cycle of, first of all, everyone highlighting issues that they think are most important about LLMs, or we have a lot of natural language models that are out in the wild as well. And what are the things that need to be addressed from a model perspective, what needs to be addressed at the system layer, what mitigations need to be put in place at end use cases. And so each one of those, the open source itself often winds up being a really crucial way by which we create better and safer AI as a community. And right now, Llama, for example, has been downloaded 800 million times and has thousands of use cases across the world. And in each one of those use cases, and then there's a lot of derivative models from Llama as well. And in many of those, people are publishing and writing what it is that they found in Llama that didn't work for them, and they changed it for their specific end use. And that has been really helpful.
Maybe to add quickly to that, the people out there are worried. They are losing trust in big corporations. They are losing trust in governments. And so why it's important that these AI Safety Institute boards develop a way to collaborate with the industry, but also to hold them accountable over what Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said, I think in a good way as a politician back at Bletchley Park, is you do not grade your own homework, which is the metaphor you put forward, which I think is quite good. So having a network of international institutions that are not necessarily regulators, that are trying to invent the metrology, the best practices in a way which is collaborative with the industry, inclusive of civil society, to put in place the conditions to create the right kind of independence, evaluation, measurement, as a way to advance innovation in a trustworthy way is really important. And in a way that is building on science, moving towards standards, not too fast, not too aggressively, vis-a-vis what and how the industry should self-organize. And add to this layer of internal, like what Serafina is doing, is really important. We need people empowered within these companies to do AI safety. That's self-governance. We also need third-party evaluators. That's the kind of thing that we can do. And I think we really need also a kind of governance, if not regulatory backstop, auditing ecosystem. And that network is trying to build that at scale in a way that international cooperation is baked in at the core without overstepping on the need for pluralism, for example. We don't have the same political systems. For example, here in France, we believe in the need to prevent hate speech. We have limits to freedom of expression. And so respecting that diversity, and at the same time moving towards common grounds in terms of metrology and some of the best practices to address these big and complex stochastic systems that are so difficult to evaluate and understand.
Please.
Just a short follow-up, because I think what you said about losing trust is very key. And I think what we have seen is that the public rollout of ChatGPT made this technology move from the basement of the engineers to national politics, even to the UN Security Council, in the shortest time I have experienced ever in this field, working with it for some years. So we both have the hype, the promise of it will solve all the SDGs, and we have the scare that it's an existential threat. Now here we have discussed how we need to be much more concrete and actionable on the risks, but also on what it can deliver. And that will be a huge parameter for also for this summit and us going forward to be a success. And of course, it's not only the tech industry's profit that has to define that, but it has to be a dialogue globally. What do we really want to use AI for? We have had science days here where they are using AI to look for water on exoplanets and the protein structure. And here we have other discussions about mis and disinformation generated by AI. So we both have a huge global obligation when it comes to the risk side, but also to the opportunity side.
I think that's a great place to pivot, Serafina, really quickly, and then I'll ask a last question to wrap things up. Yeah.
I just wanted to join the party. It's fine. It's on. Yeah. So I just want to join the party on that. Yeah. Specifically on the independent audits thing, I think it's partly because it ties into my last point about like the actual science of doing evaluations and people needing to remember how to do that. In that I obviously think you shouldn't grade your own homework. Like trusting a bunch of big companies to tell you what they should do is a terrible idea. Despite the fact that I run one of those teams. But also I think there's like an interesting thing that people don't talk about very much, which is that like you were talking about the exponential growth of the field just now, right? How it like overnight. But the exponential growth of the field definitionally means that most people who are in this field have not been in it for very long. That's just like the way exponential growth works, right? Which means that like a huge amount of them have not seen very much, do not have a whole lot of like background to build on, or like knowledge of what has been done before and what has failed, and the same hype cycle that has existed. Like the scale hype cycle happened 10 years ago with a different type of model that nobody remembers who's in it really recently. And so I think there's this, I think, tension between needing independent audits like that, but also needing them to have a type of rigor that's hard to find in a field that everyone has suddenly jumped on. And so I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm more just saying like I see a huge amount of things out there where like I would really like independent audits that I could trust. There aren't that many of them because, you know, the original paper on malicious use, testing malicious use, cites as their like conceptualization of harm, like LLMs can be used for all sorts of cybersecurity risks and all sorts of stuff. And then their testing stuff is like, how do I cut down a stop sign? And they try to jailbreak a model to tell them how to do that. Genuinely, you can go read it. It's from 2023. It's like the original jailbreaking paper. And I feel like people don't notice these sorts of things where it's like people like, because whoever did it was a random scientist engineer somewhere and was like, oh, this would be cool. But they didn't spend a lot of time thinking about like, what societal harm am I trying to measure? How am I going to measure it? So yeah, one of the reasons that I like working with these guys actually is that they do that better. But genuinely, so I think I just wanted to bring up that tension between, I do think you need something independent, but you somehow need to find a way that you have still grounded it in like enough science and stuff, even though a huge amount of the people in this field have not been in it for very long.
If only we could, yeah. If only we could, there are many. If only we could spend the next several hours talking about audits, right? Like we would have a very, very rich discussion and we could make it a huge discussion. Everyone here would be chatting. But we can't. And unfortunately, we have to wrap this up. Bring it back to a comment that Dita made about, the dialogue, right? We're here in the Action Summit. Everyone's here to have a dialogue across sectors. Ending on maybe a positive note, what is something that you're most looking forward to this week? An organization that you're most looking forward to meeting, interacting with, an event you're most looking forward to attending as the summit kicks off tomorrow? I would love to hear just a closing thought from each of you.
I'm really excited about what France is trying to launch with this Open Science Foundation and Open Source Foundation. I think it's imperative to bridge the gap towards a global majority. Safety is really important. Access is really important. And if we don't bridge that gap, the perception of regulatory capture is going to really snowball into something that is going to be Serafina's, your work, my work more difficult. We need to balance out safety with access, and that's enormously difficult to do. And so the fact that we are creating a foundation, funding it, I hope that they will announce a big budget, because we need to build those bridges with Africa, speaking as a Frenchman, with Asia, to equip the global South, to equip the global majority with a voice in the field that is positive, and at the same time calibrate the needs, because their need for evaluations are higher than ours. They have been used as guinea pigs in the past in clinical trials. Are we going to reproduce the same mistake again? Because their urgency to access basic services is there. And so it's tempting for them to already use these models for medical diagnostics. And at the same time, we know that they are not necessarily qualified for that. So that's what I'm excited to realign the conversation towards that.
I'm really excited for the use cases, the AI for science and AI for medicine specifically, and done the correct way, where clinicians become much more embedded into the technology. So borrowing from existing fields so that we can make sure that we actually meet the moment and use the technology for all of its capacity, while also figuring out how we're going to do the testing with the right people in mind, so that everyone's needs are actually addressed. So that's what's really exciting for me. And of course, like, AI for Science days have already happened on Thursday and Friday, but I think we're going to see a lot more of that coming out tomorrow and Tuesday.
I'm excited with French diplomacy at its finest, I would say, you know that, but the ability to really pull this together, make it a global conversation and multi-stakeholder, that makes me very happy.
Yeah, I guess mine is somewhat similar to yours. It's that, like, if I look back at from the change from this summit to the previous one, it's the amount of different voices that are in the room. It's like a much more diverse from everything, like along all of the axes of that type of diversity. And I think that's super important, since if I talk about missed opportunities and what sorts of things I am missing, that's the sort of thing I'm missing access to. And also that it has shifted a lot in to recognizing more of a definition of safety. Like the original Bletchley Park one was very, very specific. And people have started to come down on being like, okay, what more societal harms can we talk about? And so, yeah, so I think those two things are the most for me.
Great. Thank you all so much. Please join me in thanking this excellent panel and Humane Intelligence for having us. Thanks.